Imagine spending like your entire day just analyzing data on genocide, systemic racism, and, profound generational trauma.
Oh, man. Yeah, that is a heavy day.
Right. And the standard academic response to that kind of dark material is to build this wall of sterile statistics just to protect your sanity.
Exactly. You distance yourself, you turn human suffering into these neat little spreadsheets.
Yeah. Or highly theoretical monographs. But today we are looking at a researcher who takes the exact opposite approach.
He really does. He takes that harrowing data, totally breaks down the wall, and turns it into award-winning poetry and a public-facing weekly broadcast.
It's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're exploring the fascinating multi-disciplinary career of Dr. J.P. Linstroth.
It is a remarkable pivot, honestly. We're talking about moving from the hyper-rational, heavily footnoted world of an anthropologist directly into the vulnerable world of an artist.
Yeah, his coping mechanism isn't detachment, it's immersion.
Immersion, exactly.
So our mission today is to examine exactly how he bridges this massive gap between sterile academic statistics and vibrant human emotion to advocate for social justice.
And looking at the stack of materials we have right here on the desk,
Which is huge, by the way.
it really is.
Mhm.
We've got academic bios, research summaries spanning decades, promotional materials for his upcoming media projects.
It definitely paints a picture of a mind that simply refuses to be boxed into just one discipline. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really grasp the weight of what he's doing creatively, I mean, we had to start with the foundation.
Right, the actual science part.
Exactly. We have to understand the sheer volume and intensity of the data he has been out in the world gathering
Yeah.
because his academic credentials are heavy.
Oh, for sure.
He holds a DPhil.
Yeah.
So, a Doctor of Philosophy in Social and Cultural Anthropology from the University of Oxford.
Which, establishes a baseline of immense methodological rigor right out of the gate.
Totally. But he didn't just stay in the ivory tower.
Far from it. I mean, his fieldwork is incredibly extensive. Just looking conceptually at his timeline here, between 2005 and 2007, he was out in South Florida on an Alexander von Humboldt research grant.
Yes, and he wasn't just looking at immigration as some, broad, faceless demographic shift.
Right.
He was studying the psychological concept of belongingness among Cuban, Haitian, and Guatemalan Mayan immigrants.
And that concept of belongingness is arguably the central tension of the modern immigrant experience.
Oh, absolutely.
It asks this really mechanical question. How do people who have been displaced, often by violent conflict or, total economic devastation, how do they try to carve out an identity in a completely foreign environment?
An environment that is sometimes actively hostile to them,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You are navigating language barriers, legal limbos, and the constant threat of cultural erasure all at the same time.
It is a complete psychological tightrope.
And then he took that same lens of inquiry to entirely different continents.
Right, the Brazil fieldwork.
Yeah, in 2009, he received a Fulbright Scholar Award to Brazil, becoming a visiting professor in Manaus.
And there, he was studying nearly a dozen distinct, highly marginalized indigenous tribes deep in the urban Amazon.
Yeah, groups like the Apiranan and the Cambeba,
The Kokama, the Munduruku,
Saraimoe, the Ticuna Tucano. The list is extensive.
It really is. And he was specifically looking at their indigenous advocacy and the discrimination they face.
Because when you move indigenous populations into urban Amazonian centers like Manaus, you create this brutal friction.
Right, between ancient traditional cultures and modern aggressive economic expansion.
They are out there fighting for basic land rights and visibility in a system that is designed to look right past them.
Add to that his extensive research in the Basque Country of Spain.
Oh, yeah, the Basque research is fascinating.
He was looking at the intersection of gender, nationalist movements, and the highly complex Basque peace process.
Which, by the way, is such a fascinating dynamic. You normally think of nationalist movements or peace treaties as these purely political, male-dominated geopolitical events.
Right, guys in suits signing papers.
Exactly. But Linstroth looks at the actual mechanism of the culture. In many conflict zones, nationalist movements rely on highly patriarchal tropes.
The male warrior, the male diplomat.
Yeah. But who is actually holding the cultural memory together during speech suppression?
Usually it's the women.
Yep. Linstroth examines how gender dictates who is allowed to speak, who is allowed to grieve publicly, and who actually shapes the reconciliation once the treaties are signed.
It's like he's a collector of incredibly complex human puzzle pieces from completely different continents, but he's realizing they all fit into the same global picture of human struggle and
Oh,
resilience.
I love that analogy. A collector of puzzle pieces.
Well, what's fascinating here is that you've hit on his exact core academic theme.
Okay.
All of these disparate research focuses coalesce into what he codified in his 2022 academic monograph, Politics and Racism Beyond Nations.
Okay, right.
He calls it the Othering Project.
So this othering project, it sounds like he's saying trauma isn't just a byproduct of a bad society, but an actual engineered feature of it.
You are entirely correct. It is an engineered feature.
Wow.
It is the systematic process by which national policies, immigration laws, and colonial histories actively create racial trauma.
Let's make sure that mechanism is crystal clear for you listening.
Uh-huh.
How does a government actively engineer an othering project?
It happens because national identity is very often built by defining who does not belong.
Ah, an exclusionary tactic.
Exactly. If a state enacts specific targeted immigration policies, or if it deliberately maintains historical colonial power structures, it isn't just expressing accidental prejudice.
It's doing it on purpose.
Right. It is actively engaging in othering to consolidate its own power.
And that creates a profound, lasting trauma for those pushed to the margins.
Whether we are talking about Haitian immigrants in South Florida navigating visa bureaucracies, or the Munduruku in the Amazon fighting deforestation.
But here is where we hit the limitation of the medium. We just mentioned his 2022 monograph.
Right.
Monographs are crucial. They are the bedrock of academic progress. But let's be honest, data in academic theory can feel incredibly cold.
Oh, completely.
If you are trying to communicate the visceral, lived reality of this othering project, a 300-page academic text filled with sociological jargon might not be the tool that actually changes hearts or sways public opinion.
Precisely. And Linstroth recognizes this limitation implicitly, which leads us into how he actually solves the problem of cold data.
Right.
He steps out of traditional bounds and engages in what he calls genre blurring and autoethnography.
Autoethnography.
Yeah.
The way I understand it, it's like he's studying a volatile chemical reaction, but instead of just standing back in a lab coat and writing down the temperature of the beaker.
He's throwing himself into the chemical mix.
Exactly. To record how the reaction changes him, too.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. He explicitly uses creative writing poetry, short stories, to capture the fieldwork experiences that would otherwise be trapped and, frankly, sterilized in dry academic papers.
He takes his raw field notes and translates them into art.
Right. It acts as a deeply human mirror to his clinical research.
And looking at his literary output, you can really see the evolution of this thought process. In 2017, he released his debut poetry collection, The Forgotten Shore.
A great starting point.
Then by 2020, he published Epochal Reckonings, a book that actually won the International Proverse Prize.
And that one deals directly with the heavy themes of nationalism and genocide.
Yeah. And then in 2022, he published Swimming in Blue Shadows, which is a hybrid collection of short stories and poems exploring human fragility.
And this is where you see the data points become protagonists. For instance, in Swimming in Blue Shadows, there is a specific short story centered around a Nahuatl flower seller.
That is the perfect example of showing versus telling.
It really is.
In a standard academic journal, that woman is just a statistic in a paper about the economic displacement of informal indigenous vendors.
It's cold.
Exactly, it's cold. But in a short story, Linstroth can write about the smell of the marigolds, the blisters on her hands, the exhaustion in her posture.
The specific tone of voice she uses to navigate a hostile marketplace.
Yes. He humanizes the data point by making you feel the texture of her daily life.
And importantly, he doesn't just focus the lens outward on his subjects, he turns it inward too.
Okay, how so?
Well, we have notes on his forthcoming poetry book, Mi Alma Perdida.
Which translates to My Lost Soul.
Right. This is described as confessional poetry. It deals with his relationship with his parents, past relationships, and deep meditations on selfhood.
Which is an incredibly vulnerable posture for a strict, Oxford-trained academic to take.
It is, but that internal vulnerability is the necessary mechanism for his external work.
Because of the autoethnography aspect?
Exactly. Autoethnography dictates that to truly understand the trauma of others, you must first be willing to examine your own interior life, your own biases, your own griefs.
Now, speaking of navigating trauma and grief, Because his upcoming work tackles some incredibly raw current events, we do need to look at how he processes the news cycle.
We do.
He has a forthcoming book called Finito, which depicts current political happenings in the United States.
And he also has a specific poem titled Reuben.
Right, which is based on a 2025 homicide involving icy immigration and customs enforcement. Because these touch on some incredibly raw, current political fault lines in the U.S., I want to pause for a second.
Yes, and I want to be very clear here. Regardless of where anyone sits on the political spectrum, what we are analyzing today is simply the method of his work.
Exactly.
We aren't here to endorse or critique a specific political stance left, right, or center. Our analytical focus is purely on how a researcher uses real-time, highly polarizing current events as the raw material for ethnographic art.
Totally. We are just looking at how an anthropologist processes the modern world. But I do want to push back on this approach a little bit,
Okay.
because I think it's a tension a lot of academics would point out. When an academic starts writing poetry that reviewers describe as having the finesse of a classicist and the clarion urgency of an activist, doesn't that risk diluting the hard science?
That's a fair question.
If you blur the genres too much and get too emotional, do you lose the rigorous authority of the objective observer?
It is a valid critique, and one the academic establishment often leverages against autoethnography. But I would argue, and his career trajectory heavily suggests, that it doesn't dilute the science, it completes it.
Completes it. Okay.
Linstroth views his creative writing as a personal testimonial.
So he's bearing witness, not just collecting data.
Precisely.
Wow.
Think of the division of labor this way. His academic work analyzes the cold mechanics of cognition and ethno-nationalism.
It explains the how of the machine.
Yes. But his poetry focuses on the human indomitability behind those statistics. It explores the cost of the machine.
Oh, okay, I see.
The goal of the academic monograph is intellectual understanding, but the goal of the poetry is to evoke empathy and compassion.
You need the data to empirically prove that a systemic issue exists, but you need the art to make people care enough to actually change it.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. If the academic work proves the problem and the poetry makes us feel the problem, there's still one missing link.
Which is?
How do you actually get this synthesized understanding out of the university library and into the hands of everyday people?
Yes.
Which brings us to the announcement in our source materials regarding his newest venture. He is actively moving into the public square with a weekly broadcast project.
The J.P. Linstroth Epochal Reckonings podcast.
Named after his award-winning book.
Which is an incredibly demanding format for a single researcher to produce.
Right. Moving from the glacial pace of academic publishing to dropping a new, thoroughly researched topic every single Friday.
It's a huge shift.
And for you listening, today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. So we want to highlight that this coming Friday, March 20th, he is dropping a broadcast titled The Banality of Our Evil.
That title is a phenomenal hook.
It really is.
Because it forces the listener to confront a very heavy philosophical concept. It clearly references Hannah Arendt's famous phrase, the banality of evil.
Right. Arndt coined that phrase while covering the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of the major organizers of the Holocaust.
She realized that evil wasn't always perpetrated by sociopathic monsters.
Often it was carried out by terrifyingly normal bureaucrats who were simply doing their jobs and following orders without thinking critically.
Exactly. But notice what Linstroth does with the title. He updates it to the banality of our evil.
He is turning the lens on contemporary society.
He is asking how we, as everyday citizens, might be complicit in the modern othering project simply through our complacency.
Wow. By ignoring the news, by accepting bureaucratic cruelty as the status quo.
By not questioning the systems we live within. He is taking a dense 20th century philosophical concept and making it a mirror for the listener today.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Once you look past this Friday's drop, the sheer eclectic mix of upcoming topics he has slated is wild.
It's all over the map, in the best way.
He has episodes titled Why Indigenous Lives Should Matter and discussions on preventing the genocide of the most vulnerable.
Those are the heavy, crucial anthropological topics you'd expect.
Right, but then he pivots completely. He has an episode titled History and Science as Candles in the Dark, which is a direct nod to Carl Sagan.
Moving from the mechanics of human cruelty into the philosophy of science and public enlightenment.
And it doesn't stop there. He then jumps into the actual biochemistry of love and genius.
an exploration of the neurological and chemical reactions behind human creativity.
He's also dedicating episodes to readings of his own poetry, like a piece called Sea King, which celebrates his father's military career.
And interspersed with all of this are deep dives into the complexities of the Basque peace process and the ambivalent belonging of Haitian immigrants.
It's just a huge breadth of material.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the grand design of his career culminating in this public broadcast.
Yeah.
Imagine the intellectual agility required to jump from the granular political nuances of a European peace treaty to the literal biochemistry of human creativity in a single week.
It is staggering. But it proves that he views all of these things, science, poetry, history, politics, as interconnected facets of the human experience.
It all serves a unified purpose.
Yeah.
Look at his resume. Whether he's writing a public op-ed for Counterpunch, or the Houston Chronicle, serving as an adjunct professor at Palm Beach State College, or, receiving a 2017 Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from the White House.
His core philosophy is crystal clear.
Exactly. Knowledge is only valuable when it is understood and applied by the public.
It's not just knowledge for the sake of filling up a university archive.
Exactly. In fact, one of his upcoming broadcast topics is literally titled Footnoting History for the Sake of History and for the Sake of Peace.
That's a powerful title.
He is footnoting the traumas of marginalized peoples, the urban Amerindians in Brazil, the displaced immigrants in South Florida, the Basque nationalists.
But he isn't doing it just so future historians have an accurate record.
He is doing it to actively build a framework for conflict resolution and peace right now.
And he even takes time in his materials to explicitly thank the patrons who support his broadcast.
Recognizing that building a better world isn't a solo academic endeavor, it is a collaborative public effort.
It's a remarkable testament to refusing to stay in your academic lane when the world desperately needs the information you have.
Absolutely.
Which brings it all back to you, the listener. How do you consume information about the world's ongoing crises?
Right. When you look at the news, do you just skim the headlines and the cold data?
The statistics on immigration, the raw numbers of people displaced by conflict? Or do you actively seek out the human stories, the autoethnography, and the poetry behind those statistics?
Because the data will only tell you the mechanics of what happened.
Only the stories will tell you what it actually meant to the people who survived it.
Well said.
So, what does this all mean? We've looked at a researcher who took the heaviest, darkest data imaginable, refused to let it turn him cynical, and instead found a way to translate it into art and public conversation.
It leaves me with a lingering thought of the future of this field.
Oh.
We see how Dr. Linstroth uses the ancient, visceral art form of poetry, paired alongside modern digital broadcasting, to process the contemporary trauma of the Othering project.
Right.
It makes you wonder, as technology evolves and the nature of human conflict shifts in the coming decades, what completely new, unforeseen artistic mediums will the next generation of anthropologists have to invent?
Wow. How will they document the cultural blind spots of our current era? And more importantly, how will they make us feel the data of tomorrow?
It's a profound question, because as we saw at the very beginning of this deep dive, when you step into the world of human struggle, the clean, objective diagnostic tools often fall short.
They really do.
You have to find a new way to diagnose the pain. And sometimes the most accurate tool we have to understand the human condition isn't a spreadsheet or a textbook. It's a poem.